crisis, and the board, how to prepare for anything. Welcome to the Better Boards podcast series, the podcast for chairs, CEOs, non-executive directors, company secretaries and their advisors. Every episode is filled with practical insights and learning from those inside the boardroom. We discuss what really matters and highlight actionable steps you can take to enhance the performance of your board. Crisis and the board. My goodness. We are recording this podcast in December 2024. We are surrounded by crisis. Not a single company who doesn't face one form or another of a crisis, which sparked the idea for this podcast. We are exploring what boards can do to prepare for a crisis, what they can do during a crisis, and how to really prepare for a crisis. I'm delighted to talk with Barbara Lambert. Barbara is a professional board member. She chairs or is a member of the Audit, Risk and Nomination Committee. Her current and past mandates include Banque Pictet, Deutsche Börse, Implenia AG, Merck, Synlab and UBS Switzerland. Really large, well-known companies who all faced their challenges. Barbara spent 20 years at Arthur Andersen as a senior partner and head of the audit practice for banks and insurance companies. Barbara, thank you so much for contributing to the Better Boards podcast series.
Thank you for having invited me today and to speak about a topic I'm really passionate about.
You certainly can share from your rich experience. I mean, we had a fantastic prep call. You have seen quite some crises in your time, in various roles over the last 4 decades, really. Have you noticed any patterns in those crises?
Yes, I think there are common patterns and there are certain events which will develop into a global crisis and they will hit everybody because they're externally driven. Like the corona pandemic, but the impact will still depend on the industry or the global reach of a group. Some can derive from global topics, but will only have on certain companies a potentially huge impact, like cyber attacks, when a denial of service attack shuts down a company for several days, weeks, or even months, or the Me Too scandals leading to step downs of CEOs and board members, and some which are unfortunately homemade, like financial fraud cases, greenwashing scandals, or serious product issues like we have recently seen in the aerospace sector, and which are in the end more linked to serious governance, culture, and risk management issues. Some also say there are 3 types of crisis. The one which is looming at the horizon because it is so evident that it will happen and could therefore be planned for. The one which could be predicted because having a high likelihood to occur, or the one which is totally unpredictable. But I think the lines between these categories are getting a bit blurred recently. In which category would you typically put the Ukraine war or social unrest, which might arise from current political landscape? Or does a hurricane or bushfire still fall into the category of unpredictable? I also think that a further common feature is that a crisis coming from external events has more often a greater speed than the surprise factor, and internal crises are more likely to be more hidden and evolve gradually before they burst out really in a major crisis or have even a worse result, or come in waves when they gain more and more attention from media and the public, like the Dieselgate scandal. But I think what all crises I have seen have in common is they all have serious impacts on multiple aspects and stakeholders, financially, reputation-wise, shareholders, employees, and clients. And if they are not well managed and taken seriously from the beginning, I think it's important to say from the beginning, then they can lead to major reputational crisis and important brand damage, or even to potentially to bankruptcy.
Now, we've seen quite some crises. We are surrounded by crises like never before. And yet, boards are very often ill prepared, let's say the least. Let's start with looking at the dark side. What was the most stupid thing you have seen the boards are doing in a crisis situation?
I think it's the underestimation of the situation, to be totally overconfident and to have as a reaction like this will and cannot happen to us. And therefore, no scenario planning or even to think about the worst case scenario was not done. There was also too little communication, too late, and not transparent. And then the company lost control on external and internal communication. And you had rumors starting to spread out. You had first clients leaving. Then you had the key people leaving. And then it started to be an avalanche, which nobody could any longer control. And which unfortunately did not only finish in a crisis, but finished in the end of a company. I'm talking about Arthur Andersen, my former employee. And since it happened to me, I had promised to myself that I will do my very best, either as an executive director or now as a board member, that this will not happen a second time to me, nor to the companies I'm taking care of. And I wish it was really a once in a lifetime experience. I learned a lot, this for sure, and I still use what I learned today, but I truly do not wish this to anybody happen.
After we explored the darker side, let's look at the brighter side. What should be the role of boards in an emerging crisis and in a full blown crisis?
I think, as you said before, I think the speed and the unpredictability and the far reaching consequences we are living today of technological evolution, geopolitical developments are not going to decrease in the coming years. And especially since recent elections and elections to come in major countries in Europe. And all this together will give a quite toxic cocktail of uncertainties and crisis potential. And all these events and mega trends, I think they are interconnected and could even be accelerated by external circumstances, like, for example, climate change, a shortage of water, the cost of energy. And I think the role of the board should be threefold. First, you need help to prevent. Second, you need to support management. And third, to perform a serious post-crisis analysis, not only of your company and wishing again that this will not happen, but also to look on what other companies have done as a lesson learned exercise.
Now let's look a little bit into this lessons learned part. What have you really seen boards are doing that manage a crisis really well?
I think, and as you said, I started on the day of the major stock exchange crash in October 87. So I have a kind of 40 years of crisis. And I've established some golden rules. And I think it starts before the crisis. So the board should know where the company is vulnerable and to prevent that disruption and risk results in a crisis. And this means that you are informed at least twice a year. And of course, highly regulated companies need to do this more often about the risk situation. And you need to decide whether the situation is within the risk appetite or not. And if not, that actions are swiftly taken. And this should cover not only the financial risk side, but also the non-financial operational risks and also geopolitical risks. And management should present to the board a timely and comprehensive early warning dashboard to inform about the resilience level, like the level of liquidity and cash flow, inventory levels, dependencies, concentration risks on customers, products, and countries, the stability of IT systems, just to name a few. Second, I think the board needs to be united and the board needs to trust each other. And you also need to have trust in the chairman, but also in the executive management, because the worst thing which can happen is that the board is absorbed by internal power play and internal fights, communicates divergent opinions to the public, or does not believe in management. And I think to be united, you have to be united now, because when the crisis hits, it's clearly too late because you have other things to do,
Yeah.
and things will evolve so quickly. So I think if you're sitting on a board where you are facing difficult situations in the board or tensions with executive management, you should think of changing this at the first occasion, because we might be navigating through serious storms in the next months or years. As a third advice, I think be prepared and exercise. Even if you will soon notice that crisis manuals and various scenarios can't be applied by the book. It's a little bit when PowerPoints hits reality, reality wins. Huh? It is vital to be prepared and also go for a couple of scenarios, like a major cyber attack or a data leak or a sudden failure of an important supplier or an energy outage. And I would recommend that at least the chair participates, but you need to know the lessons learned and so also to ensure that the corrective actions are taken. And some, at the first glance, really stupid things like to distribute the list of all the contact details of the board members and management, and not only the mobile numbers. It happened to me that internet and intranet were not working, and suddenly you find yourself you don't remember any phone numbers by heart.
Nobody does these
So
days.
yes. So have this ready, and also when people are on vacation, absent, and to maintain and have ready to use phone numbers of consultants, regulators, lawyers, bankers, or medias. And then of course this is the prevention side, but during the crisis, I think the best is to create a task force amongst board members, which should usually consist of the chairman or the vice chairman. If the chairman would be conflicted, two or three other members. It needs to be small to be efficient, and to choose members who are in the board since a couple of years, quite seniors, and who either have crisis experience or who are an expert in a certain matter. We have a lot of international boards right now, but it is good to be in the same time zone if possible, and to also be physically present at the headquarters. What I also found is the value of a well functioning and experienced corporate secretary office, because you will need support. And of course, the heads of the control functions and external support from lawyers and forensic team and so on. Even if you have this task force, I think the board needs, however, absolutely to ensure to keep its oversight role in the crisis, while at the same time supporting the executive management. But to maintain independence seems really crucial to me. Then the famous communication issue. You need to keep all the board members regularly in the loop to maintain contacts with clients and regulators, but especially also internally. I think the worst which can happen is that employees would learn from the media what is going on.
There's quite some employees around the globe do and did.
Yeah, unfortunately. And also, I think you need one voice who speaks. And if possibly to keep it as neutral as possible, it should be, the press or communication or speaker of the company. But it may also arrive that even the CEO or the chair might step in. Social media, I think what they can do positively or negatively is absolutely amazing. So you need to try to use them in a positive way, but this also means that you need to have experience into that. And to me, I think this is a rule I try to apply during my whole life: is be transparent and never lie. Because it is okay if you do not communicate everything, especially if you need to protect the company or a person, or if there's a panel investigation. But you should always stick to the facts, and you should not get too emotional. And this is quite difficult because especially if you find it absolutely unfair that the company is attacked. It is not good to let your emotions play. You can do this in the evening with a glass of wine, but not when you discuss outside. So rapid communication, I think, is essential, but you should also not overreact. And depending on the situation, it might be worthwhile to communicate first in order to keep the control on communication. But in other situations, it's better to not react typically on rumors. And what we have also seen, and especially in the US, this is absolutely expected, to publicly apologize. But it needs to be honest and authentic. And excuses alone are no longer sufficient. And it needs to be explained what measures will be taken and to show that lessons learned will really be implemented. And if necessary, to dismiss somebody even from the C-suite.
I mean, you mentioned so many things there. And when I do the board reviews, I mean, the key point I see in every organization is that the agendas are full. So we have a full agenda. There are always topics that should be on the agenda, but they can't be on the agenda. Now, to prepare well for a crisis requires time. So, how can this really be squeezed in the already full agendas?
I think there's no miracle, but there's just a solution. You need to make more time. I think the times where a board member just came in for half a day and had a nice dinner, a nice lunch, they're definitively over. And you need time for meetings, for strategic discussions, to mingle around with board members and also with management. You need much more time also to prepare, because, as you know, it is not only about reading documents. What is expected from board member is to think about and to come up with the famous questions maybe nobody wants to ask in the board. But the time requirement is clearly increasing. Yes.
So, any practical tips? Because every listener probably faces a challenge, if not a crisis. And when we switch on the TV, when we switch on the radio in the car, we all hear about crisis, crisis, crisis. So, how will this really change the work of the board going forward?
I think, it's no longer the job you do after retirement. It's really a full-time job and a new step in your professional career. And this means that on one side, you need hard skills. And this also means you need to maintain your hard skills on the risk and opportunities which are rising from all these mega trends and regulatory developments. And you have the whole cyberspace, the data protection, the ESG, the artificial intelligence. You have quantum computing, just to name a few. To see also where does the company stand compared to the competitors, and what you can do there. It is best practice that at least once or twice a year, the full board should be given the possibility to talk about in a workshop and also have discussion with external experts. Or you can do individual trainings, which are offered nowadays by business schools and which are really tailored to board member responsibility. You have online courses, professional associations, board forums where these topics are discussed. And I think all this together will then help you to identify the blind spots potentially a company has, and also to be able to challenge the risk reports when they are presented to you. And I think the strategy exercise, which usually is done for 3 to 5 years, well, you have seen our world. Everything is uncertain, changes very quickly. I think there should be an annual update. And why not do this? And I'm talking about a 1-2 days exercise, which you would do outside. And there are a lot of professional board members now. So to have a good network and to also have the possibility to exchange in a very trustful environment and to ask for advice, I think is important. And also the soft skills. I think if you go through a crisis, it really hits you physically. I mean, these are stressful times, and you should be ensure that you have personal resilience and also communication skills, especially if you are a chairman. But again, these can be trained, and there are even nowadays coaches for board members. What I said before, I think to do the simulation crisis exercise. When I've done this a couple of years already ago, this was really an eye opener to see, how this works. On one side, it gives you confidence that, yes, the company is prepared, but then suddenly you realize on that side, we absolutely need to improve. And the best thing also to do is to choose a scenario where the company is really the most vulnerable, or where it would have the biggest impacts. Like what would be a major increase of tariffs for our export to the USA? And I think it's really a hot topic right now, or to China. What would be the consequences if a major supplier would be hit by a cyber attack or by sanctions? So I think I strongly really suggest to do it sooner than later.
No, thank you so much. You mentioned so many things, and I think probably our listeners go, oh my God, what a long to-do list. So at the end, really tough questions. What out of all of these things, what are the 3 things our listeners should take away from this podcast episode?
I would say the first is crisis management starts before the crisis. So you need to ensure as a board member that the company is prepared, thinks in scenarios, and has contingency plans and a robust risk management framework. Second, don't overestimate your availability. Before you accept a new or an additional mandate, decide honestly if you would really have the time to do it. And also apply carefully due diligence on the strategic, financial, operational, overall situation of the company and the quality of the management, the tone at the top, and also the willingness to change before you accept a new mandate. And the third thing I would say, crises and challenges are here to stay because of the current economical, technological, and geopolitical environment. And I think we just need to accept it. But we need to accept it as a fact, and we should not get emotional about or be overwhelmed by the magnitude. And I think as a board member, you need to show that you can be the solid rock to whom executive management can turn for advice, and also spread out the message that the crisis can be a productive state if it is well managed. And if so, a company can even become stronger afterwards.
Fantastic, Barbara. There's a lot to chew over from this episode. Thank you so much for contributing to the Better Boards podcast series.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. If you have an idea of a topic you would like to see covered, or if you would like to contribute yourself, or if you are interested to hear what we are actually doing, we are not just doing the podcast. Our main business is conducting board evaluations, providing a platform organizations can use for their internal or as part of their external evaluation and board development programs. If you are interested to hear more about our work, get in touch. We are always delighted to hear from you. Once again, thank you for listening.